Greetings to everyone. We are the seventh group and we hope you are enjoying the comfort of your seats because we are to embark on a journey through the value of philosophy, written by Bertrand Russell. But before that, let me introduce your reporter so that you would be familiar with us. I am John Clifford si Piñera.
I am Mikaela Andrea Manalang.
And I am David Legaspi.
To formally begin this discussion, let us have a glimpse first of the contents of our report. We have divided the reading into subparts, and we will be asking the questions: Who is Bertrand Russell? What are the misconceptions about philosophy? What is philosophy and what is not? Where does the value of philosophy lie? What does philosophic contemplation mean? And we will have it all be answered by conclusion. Moving on, we ask the first question again. Who is Bertrand Russell? Mika Manalang has the answers for that.
Bertrand Arthur William Russell was born on the 18th of May in the year 1872 into a liberal family in the United Kingdom. He was a prominent logician, mathematician, and public intellectual. His outstanding work in the philosophy of science and mathematics, as well as logic, epistemology, and metaphysics, made him a respectable authority in the 20th century. Russell, alongside his peers, popularized analytic philosophy, which is centered around the use of language and the analysis of concepts. This branch of philosophy makes use of logic and math, and even the natural sciences. In his dynamic lifetime, he was able to publish more than 70 books, one of which was titled The Problems of Philosophy in the year 1912. In this book, he presented different theories from well-known philosophers such as Plato and John Locke. It was also in this book that he posed insoluble questions and proceeded to establish that the value of philosophy is dependent on the unknown. In 1950, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature as an acknowledgement for his diverse writing, which advocates humanitarian ideals and freedom of thought. On the night of February 2, 1970, Russell passed away at the age of 97 due to influenza.
The second point of our report is the misconceptions about philosophy. For the first excerpt, it is the more necessary to consider this question, in view of the fact that many men under the influence of science or of practical affairs are inclined to doubt whether philosophy is anything better than innocent but useless trifling, hair-splitting distinctions and controversies on matters concerning which knowledge is impossible. Trivial debates one of the biggest misconceptions regarding philosophy. Endless bickering having nothing as the result, and having to continue this process of questioning only to arrive at the second point, unattainable knowledge. But this isn't the case. Through those debates are the expansion of each other's minds, opening up new paths of questions, serving as a step towards the truth. The next excerpt is this view of philosophy appears to result partly from a wrong conception of the ends of life, partly from a wrong conception of the kind of goods which philosophy strives to achieve. The first point is the objective of philosophy. People often have the same type of notion to philosophy in science, having to procure products that would directly benefit the world, leading them to having a superficial view of philosophy. Its true objective is to be an instrument of advancement of the mind. This growth is achieved by the use of products of philosophy. Our second point, producing goods to be consumed by the mind. Next one is, but further, if we are not to fail in our endeavor to determine the value of philosophy, we must first free our minds from the prejudices of what are wrongly called practical men. The practical man, as it was described by Bertrand Russell, neglects the needs of the mind. He solely focuses on the appetite of his body. feeding it until its hunger is sated. Making up the majority of the population, philosophy's significance is being undermined as an effect. This leads us to our next point, food for the mind. The true value of this study lies in its ability to enrich us, through ceaseless questioning providing new food for the mind. The fourth excerpt is, it is exclusively among the goods of the mind that the value of philosophy is to be found, and only those who are not indifferent to these goods can be persuaded that the study of philosophy is not a waste of time. As it was stated earlier, the act of philosophizing is seen as a pointless effort, a fool's errand. This is because of ignorance, not giving this study the chance to show its importance. As it was stated by Russell, only those who have the enthusiasm to study will truly see philosophy for what it is. This leads us to our second point, passion for learning. Having the burning desire to develop one's mind and to constantly consume the goods for it. Only then will the value of philosophy unravel itself. Now that we know the misconceptions about philosophy, let me give you the answer to the question, what is philosophy and what is not? One part of Russell's book reads, thus, to a great extent, the uncertainty of philosophy is more apparent than real. Those questions which are already capable of definite answers are placed in the sciences, while those only to which at present no definite answer can be given remain to form the residue which is called philosophy. Philosophy itself doesn't give definite answers. The unresolved queries are its building blocks, serving as instruments for the development of the self, giving off uncertain answers, leading to new sets of questions that are the evolved form of their predecessors. This endless process births fresh perspectives, an avant-garde way of seeing the universe, unlocking more doors leading to the absolute truth.
As we continue on with the reading, an excerpt from another paragraph states, there are many questions, and among them those that are of the profoundest interest to our spiritual life, which, so far as we can see, must remain insoluble to the human intellect. As previously mentioned, concepts proven to have definite answers are passed on to the sciences for further explanation. Yet, there still remain a plethora of questions that remain in philosophy because of their inscrutable nature. Most discourse between philosophers revolves around the concepts of our spirituality or human beliefs that are greater than us, those that people categorize as divine creations. A familiar example of this question is there a God? This remains a debatable topic in philosophy due to the fact that people cannot provide sensory or visual answers to provide its existence. In connection, Russell posed three questions that philosophers have repeatedly scrutinized, yet until now, they have been unable to give an undisputed answer. Has the universe any unity of plan or purpose, or is it a fortuitous concurrence of atoms? Is consciousness a permanent part of the universe, giving hope of indefinite growth in wisdom, or is it a transitory accident on a small planet on which life must ultimately become impossible? Are good and evil of importance to the universe or only to man? For his first question, he asks whether in the grand scheme of things, the universe will serve a greater purpose or is it simply a group of atoms that came to fruition? Another question revolves around our consciousness and whether it has always been a part of the universe, even before life existed, or was it accidentally discovered at the same time that life prospered on this planet that we consider our home? And for his last question, he makes us think about good and evil, and whether it is a concept that applies to all aspects of the universe or only to humans, whom Aristotle considered rational beings. Towards the end of a specific passage, Russell wrote, "It is part of the business of philosophy to continue the consideration of such questions to make us aware of their importance." To fully understand what he meant by this, it must be remembered that whenever philosophers provide their own answers to queries, they are not logically proven to be true. Still, they continue to look into these topics of interest, however unsolvable they might seem, because this is the importance of philosophy. It reminds us that we should remain curious and be willing to find answers anywhere. The uncertainty in these answers drives us to examine these questions repeatedly and scrutinize them in more ways than one, instead of expecting to find different answers from the same old perspective. Additionally, philosophy helps us break out of the box of knowledge we've locked ourselves into by providing us with new insights on how the world works. It also encourages us to wonder. We must not always rely on the information easily given to us. Rather, we must strive to look for answers ourselves for our own growth and progress. Lastly, to further understand what constitutes as part of the study of philosophy, it was written in Russell's book that hence, once more, the value of philosophy must not depend upon any supposed body of definitely ascertainable knowledge to be acquired by those who study it. As context, throughout history, philosophers have been convinced that it is through philosophy that the validity of answers given to the most basic questions will be proven. As previously mentioned, people turn to philosophy to get answers as to whether God is real. But until now, the existence of said being is yet to be proven. However, philosophers believe that the answers to most religious questions will be certain only after sufficient evidence of its existence has been gathered. Even so, it would be rather unwise for philosophers to immediately deem an answer to be true after a single attempt to illustrate it as such. It would be better to perform several demonstrations and compare the results to ensure that other possibilities have been considered. But if the evidence remains consistent, the topic at hand no longer concerns itself with philosophy, because of the likelihood that a definite answer will already be given. To reiterate, the value of philosophy lies in the uncertainties of life. Thus, subjects with clear-cut answers are to be passed on to science for further investigation. Those who study philosophy must be prepared to look for answers instead of relying heavily on the knowledge provided to them.
Now, on to the next question. Where does the value of philosophy lie? We have learned earlier that the value of philosophy must not depend on any body of definitely ascertainable knowledge by those who study it. Because if that's the case, then it deviates from philosophy and becomes a separate science. So, we ask again, where can we find its value and purpose? To understand it further, we have to read this excerpt from the reading. Philosophy, though unable to tell us with certainty what is the true answer to the doubts which it raises, is able to suggest many possibilities which enlarge our thoughts and free them from the tyranny of custom. The value of philosophy lies in its very uncertainty, as previously mentioned. This is considered true because philosophy does not entertain questions that already have definite answers, but those that make us wonder about the unfamiliarity of the world around us. And as a result of that wondering and acceptance of new ideas, as stated beforehand, our thoughts are enlarged and freed from what we considered custom or norms. But how about those who does not entertain philosophy? What happens to them? Well, on the contrary, someone who does not philosophize gets imprisoned by their own prejudices and convictions. They become limited by their own habitual beliefs, which they have gained through the course of their lives. In such living, the world becomes finite and definite, and any unfamiliar knowledge is automatically rejected. What does this tell us about the value of philosophy? It tells us that philosophy is a form of liberty. Although philosophy diminishes certainty, which others may not like, and shows us more problems with incomplete answers, only through it can we become infinite and be introduced to many possibilities beyond our own understanding of things. Aside from that, we are also told that philosophy has a value through the greatness of the objects which it contemplates, and the freedom from narrow and personal aims resulting from this contemplation. The value of philosophy can also be found in the objects we observe or ponder upon, because through these objects that we contemplate and learn from, we are introduced to the world outside our own. Only in this philosophical life can we attain peace and freedom of the mind. Our instinctive knowledge and pre-existing prejudices, may it be religious beliefs, habits, and self-assertions, hinder us from attaining this freedom of the mind. It is a barrier, and unless we expand our borders to the world around us, we will remain powerless in this abstract prison. We can use this very simple analogy to understand the value of philosophy. We, as humans, exist within our private interests and prejudices, within what we believe, and within the tyranny of custom we grew up in. And staying in this very state of mind, we are imprisoned because we automatically reject ideas that do not coincide with conformity. We are birds in a cage. But philosophy, even in its simplest form, acts as a key. Contemplation introduces us to possibilities and uncertainties, and through it, our minds are freed. I have repeatedly mentioned contemplation a few times in the previous question. But now, in order to fully understand the value of philosophy, we have to ask another one. What is philosophic contemplation, and how does it benefit us? It is stated in the reading that philosophic contemplation does not, in its widest survey, divide the universe into two hostile camps. It views the whole impartially. Philosophic contemplation is not an unjust form of observation. With that, we can say that it does not divide or interpret the world in any way as binary concepts or two sides. What I mean is that when we contemplate, philosophy does not make us see that the world is limited to good and evil, friends and foes, and etc. It views the whole picture equally, and from there we understand the complexity of the world. It does not also prove that the universe is similar to man, but a separate entity of its own that we have to understand. But why do we have to understand the whole and its not self aspects to philosophic contemplation in the first place? It is stated in another excerpt that all acquisition of knowledge in philosophic contemplation is an enlargement of the self, but this enlargement is best attained when it is not directly sought. In this excerpt, we have learned that acquisition of knowledge benefits us because it enlarges the self. But this enlargement cannot be achieved if we do certain things that deviate from the true purpose of philosophical contemplation. First, we have to remember that the desire of knowledge and also how we approach it must always be operative and also objective. With that in consideration, we should not expect for objects in contemplation to have certain characteristics or characters that we feel it should have, but rather adapt those characters that we find within them to the self. The belief that the world is very similar to the self becomes a form of self-assertion, and with it, we will not be able to admit ideas that are unfamiliar to us. Like any form of self-assertion, it hinders the path to the enlargement of the self because it magnifies the self instead of the world which we should contemplate. The self is regarded more than the world in that case. Why does this happen frequently, some of you may ask? There is a widespread philosophical tendency towards the view which tells us that man is the measure of all things. It has the effect of robbing philosophic contemplation of all that gives it value. There are certain ideas in philosophy that view man as the measure of all things, and that all interpretations and concepts, such as time and space, are properties of the mind. This theory limits the contemplation to the self because it rejects ideas that are not considered man-made, and considers those unknowable or not of account to us. This theory of knowledge takes away the value of philosophic contemplation, which is not to make the world more of an account than the self. Or rather, I would correct myself, which is to make the world more of an account than the self. Knowledge is a union of self and not self, and like any union, it is damaged by dominion. This union starts to break when the self forces the not self to conformity within our own set of prejudices and beliefs. Any way of clinging to pre-existing ideas prevents us from learning the objects which we contemplate and eventually sees the enlargement of the self. Like what is stated in the reading, the man who finds pleasure in such a theory of knowledge is like the man who never leaves the domestic circle for fear his word might not be law. If so, how should we achieve the enlargement of the self through philosophic contemplation? In contemplation, on the contrary, we start from the not self, and through its greatness, the boundaries of self are enlarged. Starting from the self is proven to impair the union of the self and not self. That means then that it is not the true and correct way of philosophic contemplation. In order to achieve self-growth, we must let go of our personal interests or private beliefs and start from the not self. Why is that? We have come to learn that personal and private things, including our beliefs and prejudices, imprisons us from further understanding of new knowledge and achieving free intellect. Starting from the not self and having a free intellect allows us to value the universe more and abstract knowledge where our private history has little to no presence. Hence, with free intellect, as a result of philosophic contemplation, we view knowledge as impersonal, allowing us to understand it more without being distorted by our own prejudices. Just like what is stated in this excerpt, philosophic contemplation enlarges not only the objects of our thoughts, but also the objects of our actions and our affections. It makes us citizens of the universe, not only of the walled city at war with all the rest.
Let me summarize our points and reveal to you the true value of philosophy. At the conclusion of this chapter of his book, Russell penned, "These questions enlarge our conception of what is possible, enrich our intellectual imagination, and diminish the dogmatic assurance which closes the mind against speculation." Simply put, you must not dabble in philosophy and expect to acquire undisputed answers regarding various matters of life. Yes, you can get frustrated when you cannot come up with answers, but instead of quitting, you must use this as a driving force to keep going. We must keep in mind that the value of philosophy does not depend on easily acquirable knowledge. Rather, it lies in the indiscernible. To be blunt, this subject will not be easy if we opt to confine ourselves to the same ideologies we have always known and followed. In a way, once we study philosophy, we become nonconformists due to the fact that we get to test out different ways of thinking to discover ideas that were once untouched. It is also in philosophy that our beliefs are speculated to make us realize whether we truly believe them or we just hold on to them because they were fed to us before we knew better. Additionally, the true value of philosophy lies in the enlargement of knowledge and the creation of new perspectives born from the process of continuous inquiry, from the exchange of ideas of one man to another. This passes on the burning blaze of passion to the next generation, hoping to arrive at the absolute truth of our universe, which enables the self within us to unify with the not self through the enrichment of the mind. Before we end, we would like to be the one to tell you that philosophy will make or break you. If you choose to live life in the comforts of your own bubble, then you will be left in the dark about the other perspectives of the world. However, if you dare to go against the traditional way or standards of thinking in order to discover the secrets that lie within the universe, then you are in for a treat.
Thank you for that well-delivered conclusion, Mika. Our presentation has come to an end, and our group has nothing more to say but this one piece of advice to our fellow scholar ng bayan. Philosophize, contemplate, and discover the wonders of the universe where we will find the enlargement of ourselves. That is all, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.